Welcome everyone to another episode of Dice and Brushes. Sorry it's taken me so long to get all this out. I got a new job, so that's been taking up a good portion of my life. But without further ado, let's go right into the Warhammer Imperium issues 68 through 71 and a premium pack today. So, I'll just start right into this. We got one Wraith. We've already shown this in detail before, so I'm not going to do it right now. Put those to the side. And let's get into the meat of this. So this issue starts off with a little bit of lore about the Grand Bastion of Sazarakan. Basically, this is pretty close to where the Imperium first contacted the Necrons, accidentally woke some up, and one of the Forge World teams kind of got killed. So, a little bit of battle record if you want to do a campaign about it. A little bit about the Third Tyrannic War. This is High Fleet Leviathan. It tells you where, well, not one place, but both locations where the tendrils were kind of eating into the galaxy. And a two-pronged assault there. Including the devastation of Baal. Basically, the Blood Angels chapter homeworld was almost completely annihilated, but it was saved because of the greater demon of Khorne called Kabanda, who originally battled, or is originally famous for battling Sanguinius on more than one occasion. And then Gilman coming in with the Indominus Crusade and the Primaris. On the next page, we have a good amount of lore on Trazen the Infinite, 40k's favorite kleptomaniac. He is extremely important in the back section of the lore, and he is fun to read about. If you just listen or read the Infinite and the Divine. The Infinite and the Divine. Great listen. Highly recommend it. A lot of lore on him. Imhotep the Stormlord. He is one of the very few within Necron society that can challenge the Silent King in terms of power. Supreme Command is just a Necrons versus Eldari battle, if you want to read up on the lore of that little short bit. And of course we have more on how to build your Canoptic Wraith, in case you didn't keep the instructions the first few times. More on how to paint it with the paints that you've received, including the latest, like the Tesseract Glow. And then we have the 9th edition, Necron Warlord traits, how they worked, and a little mission for them, this time at 75 power. A nice even spread on the battles on the deployment zone, with the secondary objective and the primary, including the original mission rule. This is actually very well balanced. I like this mission. But, without getting too far into it, let's go into our next issue. And now we have issue number 69. Oops, let's turn off that light. See if you guys can see it better. First off, we have the first sprue for Marneus Calgar, the Primaris version, and his Honor Guard. Make sure you can see that pretty well. Flip it around so you can see details on the other side. There we go. So that will go to Brett, and I'll wonder what he'll do with that. But let's get into the meat and potatoes. So, issue 69 opens up with lore on Marneus Calgar, Chapter Master of the Ultramarines. I don't know much about him outside of this. And just because Ultramarines have never really interested me personally, but he's a pretty big figure within the Warhammer Imperium backstory, especially trying to keep Ultramar together in lieu of Guilliman, and having a hand in Guilliman's return. Talks about how he's a peerless strategist, about his honor guard, about chapter masters in general, and his crossing the Rubicon. And we have Ancient Origins, which is basically just saying the Emperor created the Space Marines. It does not talk about the Thunder Warriors at all. And it does touch on the Horus Heresy. Then it goes over the original looks of the first founding chapters. You'll notice that chapters number 2 and 11 are unknown. Games Workshop wanted to let people pretend that they had a first founding chapter or a successor of a first founding chapter without being clutched into one of these other ones. Now, it should be noted that one of them is one of the Primarchs for I don't know if it's the second or the 11th. One of the two missing Primarchs is supposedly dead, and the other is currently imprisoned by the Custodes in the Imperial Palace. So, and then Malkador and the Emperor erased people's memories and erased them from history. So that'll be fun. But then going on, we have a little bit about the primary battle tanks. Here, let's move this a little bit. There we go. The Predators and its variants. Destructor, Annihilator, Bowel Predators. The Bowel Predator is a pattern of the Predator that has never left. The designs have never left the Blood Angels chapter. So the AdMech don't even have any of this. Whoopsies! Then we go a little bit about the Vindicators and the weapons platform they consider it. That is the Rhino chassis. Rhino chassis, which is their main APC transport, kind of like how the United States Army has the Striker, has different variants that are built on it that can be changed for different purposes. So, like, you'll see the Razorback, which is just a few more guns. The Vindicators, which have a big gun. We have the Ultramarines Whirlwind. American Military Striker has a mortar version. The Ultramarines, the Striker, painted up as Ultramarines. And the Hunter. The Hunter is now over here. Is now considered Legends. So, you're not going to get any no more new rules for it. It's got what it's got. There's no more. I believe the Stalker is 2, just because nobody was really buying the Stalker or the Hunter. Right. And Land Raiders. Good bit of lore about the Land Raiders. And Drop Pods. How Drop Pods work with a lightning assault. And then we have our first bit on Rogue Traders. Long story short, Rogue Traders are some of the few people in the Imperium that are allowed to think for themselves. That, as long as they don't spread it. And they are allowed to deal with Xenos. So, here we go. And then how people obtain a warrant of trade to become more Rogue Traders. An example of a warrant to trade, how it might look. We have the ship name, in this case Void Mistress, where it's currently located, weapon systems, cargo capacity, tells you its service history, the ship's officers, troop numbers, some of the crew files, the first officer, the tech officer, a major. Ape does not hold a rank. He is simply the cook. And he is one of the few accepted Xenos, let's put it there, allowed within the Imperium in general. He's a Jericho, commonly weaponsmiths, but hey, one of the few Xenos allowed in the Imperium. And we have some more officers, do's and don'ts for the Rogue Traders. Then, of course, we have how to build Marneus Calgar and his honor guard. So let's move that a little bit. So I'm guessing in the next issue is where I'm thinking they have the how to paint. Then we have some of the Warlord traits for Space Marines 9th edition, including for the Vanguard. Vanguard Warlord traits were from the Vanguard Spearhead, which was in some rules, optional rules, I think was in a White Dwarf. And this is just 2 of those. This specifies Ultramarines Phobos and Ultramarines for both of the Vanguard, but in reality it's just for Phobos in general. It does not have to be Ultramarines. Then it gives an example of how the Imperium's sword would work, how Shoot and Fade from the Vanguard would work, in this case with a Lieutenant in Phobos armor, which he received very early on. Or not very early on, the Phobos Marines were in recent, sorry about that. Then the mission for this issue is Heart of the Tomb. And this is, pretty much all these are just generic Imperium vs. Necrons at this point. And it's, in essence, it's a King of the Hill style, which does actually favor Necrons. Then we have a little bonus. Push that to the side there. The Gathering Storm, Rise of the Primarch. So this is, the short version of this is, Rabute Gilman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, was not brought back from the dead entirely, although you could consider that. But basically the Inari and had a hand with other members of the Imperium to bring back Rabute Gilliman from what was a grievous wound given to him by Fulgrim. But we have a little bit Ultramar Defiant, and Ultramar is basically a system within the Imperium, kind of like a miniature Imperium that is run by the Ultramarines. The Triumvirate of the Primarch, so Cypher from the Dark Angels, or he's a fallen from the Dark Angels. In fact, he's being hunted by them still, even though he's back with them now in the lore, as I understand it. Gilman himself, and Aldrich Voldus of the Grey Knights. We have a little bit from Inquisitor Greyfax. And like I said, just a good amount of lore surrounding Gilman's return. Rise of the Primarch, him fighting Magnus on Luna. Fantastic. And then we are going to get right into the next issue. Alright, and with issue number 70, we have the 2 members of Marneus Calgar's Honor Guard. Both are Primaris, if anybody is curious. Of course, we have the bases for Marneus Calgar himself, what looks to be a 50 mil, and 2 40 millimeters for the Honor Guard themselves. That goes to the side for Brett. And then let's get into the issue itself. So now we have a little bit of the lore for the Gauntlets of Ultramar, the armor that Calgar actually wears, his eye replacement, and a short word from Gilman about Calgar as well. And his Ultramarines. A little battle record for Calgar and his Honor Guard. And some lore on the Honor Guard's weapons and armor as well. Of course. Their battle record. Then we have a nice page dedicated to Caldor Drago, Supreme Grandmaster of the Grey Knights. I want to say that he would be important. He's a major character in the lore, but he is not, unfortunately. Although he is an interesting character nevertheless. And same with Garen Crow. Of all, Grey Knights have to be incorruptible. The Purifiers for Grey Knights are symbolized by having white helmets, are supposed to be even more uncorruptible by chaos. Crow epitomized that to the nth degree, because he wields a demon blade that would literally turn anybody else as they were using it. He is its jailer, and he is not influenced by the demon blade. He's actually constantly trying to suppress the blade's power. And this, just the blade's presence has even caused the collapse of entire systems. So, great fun read for him. Go into YouTube, some lore about him. Then we have How to Paint Calgar and His Guard. Pretty simple, pretty basic. Prime blue. Do some gold and red. But beautiful nevertheless. And when we get to the helmets, they are showing a technique of using some putty to attach the heads to the top of some paint pots to act as a handle. So just an extra little technique if you want to do that. And then the 9th edition data sheets for Calgar and his honor guard. Not going to go into detail. Then the unfortunately old abilities for the armor of Heracles. Not Heracles, Heracles, worn by Calgar. It has its own abilities. It basically reduced damage by 1 to a minimum of 1. And his old warlord trait, which had the ability to refund command points. Precision Strike is the mission for this issue. Again, 75 power. This time, one player does have the advantage in terms of deployment zone. So, I'm not convinced that this is a even match. This one seems lopsided, at least to me. Then it looks like we're going to have one more issue, and before the premium pack. Alright, and now we have issue number 71. I apologize if I'm going a little quick through all of these, but I am trying to keep this video a bit shorter. This time we have 5 Lich Guard that can be either equipped with what is essentially a sword and board type of configuration or a war scythe. There are some other weapons on here like these, but I'm not as familiar with them, to be honest with you. Could have Rods of the Covenant, similar to a Staff of Light. But we'll see how things go. I do not know how I want to assemble these. Although, let me see how many swords, how many boards. 1, 2, 3, 4. Am I missing out on one of the boards? Huh. Then we got 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. But more importantly, I did not get any bases with this. They do come on 32mm bases, and luckily I have those in more than ample supply because of my works. But it is still disappointed to not receive the 32mm bases that they should be on. Alright, let's get into it. There is some lore on the Lich Guard's War Scythe. Guardian protocols and their armor plating. Oh, and the Hyperphase sword and Dispersion shield. Nice thing about the Dispersion shield is that it used to have rules where on a save of a 6, I believe it was, unmodified 6, it would bounce the shot back. But again, if you are going through a campaign, here's where you can record for your make some recordings for your Lich Guard. Age of the Dark Imperium, that was also a box set in reference to the Eye of Terror growing immensely and basically cutting off half of the Imperium from the light of the Astronomicon. Right. That, of course, caused the caster cults to rise. So safety ignorance over here. Basically, the Imperium of Man's primary defense against chaos is to keep its populace in ignorance of the Xenos, of chaos, because to let your people know about Xenos and chaos that are constantly attacking the Imperium of Man would drive most of the people absolutely insane. Then we'll go over to a little bit of lore on Helbrecht. He's still more of a background character in Warhammer 40k. His main bit is, other than being High Marshal or Chapter Master of the Black Templars, is he has a rivalry with Imhotep the Stormlord. The rivalry is based on Helbrecht challenging Imhotep and Imhotep cutting off his hand. And it's not much more than that. Then we have lore on Merrick Grimaldus, the High Chaplain of the Black Templars. If you... Hell's Reach, great book series. Somebody made a YouTube series of Hell's Reach that is absolutely phenomenal. It was fan-made. If you can find it online, I highly recommend watching it. Absolutely fantastic. And we have a story called The Emperor's Justice. In essence, this is a Black Templars versus Orcs short story where at the very end the champion, the Emperor's champion, of the Black Templars kills the Orc warlord. Incident at Erebeth 4, I think it is. This is a short story about the rogue trader. Well, I shouldn't say short story, but it's kind of like a brief about a rogue trader coming into contact with Dark Eldar, Orc freebooters, traders, and renegades from the Guardsmen, Eldar Corsairs, which are kind of like, they're pirates, and how that ended up being played out, which wasn't very good. And again, as I said in the previous section, the rogue traders are one of the very few types of people that are allowed to deal with Xenos. And it says, picked evidence shows Captain Sloan associating with elements of the Drukhari race. It's not so much associating as negotiating their own survival. But over here, we'll go on to lore of the Necrons Orkan the Diviner. Again, either listen to the audiobook, The Infinite and the Divine, or read it. Absolutely fantastic. Orkan, and basically he's kind of like an old man saying "get off my lawn" throughout it. It's kind of the vibe that I get from him. Absolutely fantastic. Him and Trazyn make a fantastic duo. We have Anrak here, the Traveler. He is a Necron Lord that actually likes getting in close and personal with his war scythe. And his abilities in-game are far more martial as well, as opposed to normally being supportive. Of course, we have how to build your Lich Guard. we have War in the Dark, the mission here. Again, Necrons versus Imperium in general. This is only at 50 power, though. Stasis Chambers, this is a much more even mission, so one side doesn't have much of an advantage against the other naturally. But with that, we have no more. Now, it says Lichguard, our part 2 is in issue 72, so I am hoping that the bases will come in that set, as well as the other weapons that I didn't see there. And then 73 will have a Locust Heavy Destroyer, which is one of the main things I've been waiting for. But, speaking of things I've been waiting for, I gotta get that premium pack out. So here's the box that the premium kit's coming. Open up a little bit. Make sure. Here we have the issue all about orcs. I'm going to put that to the side for the moment. We'll read that in a bit. Instead, we're little by little about the contents. So here we have the Gretchen, which are technically a throwaway unit, but they're a very important throwaway unit for the orcs. Absolutely fantastic for what used to be 40 points, I believe, and is now 45 points for a unit of 10, but it now also includes the run third as well. So put that to the side. I'll get the next sprue. Another important part that I've been waiting for was the big mech with shock attack gun. Put that a little bit closer to you. Just a fun weapon that is completely random. I remember playing this in a metal model version of this in 5th edition, and back then it put out a random size template, whether large, small, or just a regular shot, that could be as weak as strength 2, or it could just remove anything from the game that was underneath that template. You never knew what you were going to get, but it was always fun to roll for it. The next we'll get out. Here we go. This is the old sprue for the Orc boys. I like this sprue better because of the weapon options that you get. In the new Orc sprue, the models are nicer, but you are locked into certain options. So for example, in the newer one, you don't get to choose whether or not everybody has a Shuda or a Choppa. It's some combination. Somebody has to take a heavy weapon. Whereas in this sprue, the heavy weapon is legitimately optional. It's just that they aren't as nice as the previous, which is kind of a little trade-off. In which case, I think I'll be making these completely into Shooter Boys, because I have enough close combat with my orcs. I don't have enough shooting units, and this would be kind of a fun little change to have for my regular orc boys. Break that sprue in half. So it looks like this now, to make it much easier pile to manage. And then, we're not done. We have 3 paints. So, to start off, we'll have the Warboss Green, which will then you'd shade with Baltan Green, and then do a light highlight with, I can't even read what that is, Scarskin Green, I believe it is. Alternatively, you could do what I do and just prime them with Wraithbone and use Orc Flush contrast paint. Nice, simple. That's what I would do. But I'm going to give this a quick pause, and then we'll go over, since I believe nobody really cares about the bases, we'll go over to the actual issue. And now we have the issue for just the orcs from the premium pack. Oops. And a little bit about basic lore about the unending green tide that orcs are known to invade in. Just because they enjoy the fight. There's no rhyme or reason other than fight for orcs. If there's a big fight somewhere, they go towards it. It gives a little bit of lore about proper orkiness and what it means. A bit about the lore on the shock attack gun and how big mechs are mentally. Little snotling ammo being used, or Gretchen, really, being used for the shock attack gun, because shock attack gun basically takes a Gretchen, sucks him into the warp, lets him spend some time in there, go crazy, and then shoots him out inside of the target. We have a little bit about big mech tech, so how they just have an innate understanding for like power armor or force fields, things of that nature. First, if you're doing campaign, a little battle record for your big mech. Name chart for the weapon, and if you want to upgrade it, that's a possibility here. Same thing for the boyz. So just typical orc boys, a little bit of lore on the choppas, power claws, sluggas, shooters, the boss knob, and in this case the big shooter, although the kit also comes with the rocket launcher. Of course, we got their campaign battle record, the Runtherd and the Gretchen. A very pathetic unit, but an important pathetic unit within orcs. A little bit of lore on his Grabbin' Stick and the Grot's Blasters, because Grots, unlike most orcs, can actually shoot halfway decently. We got their battle record. How to build everything that all the orcs that you just got, starting with the boss knob for the boyz. Tongue twisters. Ugh. How to build the boyz. How to build the Runtherd. The Gretchen themselves are very simple. I think they're 3rd edition models, I want to say. I think the Gretchen are from 3rd, maybe 4th edition. Hey, the big mech with shock attack gun. How to build him as well. He's got a 40mm base. How to paint the orcs. Like I said before, they recommend Warboss green, then Beltan green, then Skarsync green for just the skin portions. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but it is very, very nice to see. Mostly because I'm a big fan of orcs. The finished section, how you might, using the paints included in your Warhammer Imperium magazine subscription, how the big mech might look, how the boyz and the Gretchen might look. Then we got the 9th edition data sheets. For each of them. And then just a little bit of lore about the orcs fighting some Necrons. And there's the mission. Grab the loot, because Necrons are tech, and tech means scrap. But with that, that is today's episode of Dice and Brushes, Warhammer Imperium unboxing here. Until next time, get your shit painted.